Hello class, and welcome to my lesson on tutorial on frequency separation, which is one of the better ways of going about cleaning up skin tones and sort of color blemishes on the face. So this will be kind of a multi-part tutorial where we first work on some of the more major issues like pimples and scarring and stray hairs, and then we move into the actual frequency separation where we separate out the color from the texture of the image. So, first thing that we do, which is what we do every time we're in Photoshop, is we go over to the background layer over here in the layers palette and we duplicate it. Now we can do that one of two ways. We can right click and hit duplicate layer, which is an easy way, or, and this works for all things in Photoshop, we can just drag it down over top the new layer button and let go, and it will automatically generate a copy. I prefer the duplicate layer, so I'm going to Command Z to undo that because it gives me the option to actually name the layer. So I'm going to hit duplicate layer, and generally my first layer that I make in Photoshop, I like to label it my working layer. So the reason I call it my working layer is because I'm preserving my original background layer just in case I need it later. I don't want to have lost pixel information. So I do all my work on a working layer. So now I have my working layer, and this is where I'm going to be doing the majority of my basic touch-ups. So we're going to be using the healing brush tool, which is what looks like a little band-aid here on the side. It should not be the spot healing brush. So if you click and hold down, it'll bring down open all the potential nested or related brushes. The spot healing looks just like the healing brush band-aid, but it has kind of a little dotted circle. That's not the one we want. We want the healing brush tool. So we're going to click on that. And remember, when you want to zoom in, it's spacebar command, and you'll see my cursor turns to a little magnification glass with a plus. We're going to start right up here at the temple. So we're just going to click a few times to zoom in, and then hold down spacebar to get the hand to move and navigate around the image at this magnification level. So what I'm going to do is use my open and close square brackets. They're near the delete key on your keyboard, just to change the size of my brush a little bit. Then I'm going to just make sure I've got a hardness of around 28 to 30%. It just gives a nice blend along the edges of the brush. You'll see that little pop-up window just showed up. It's because I haven't set my source point yet for the healing brush tool. So to set your source point, you hold down the Option key, and you'll see that the cursor changes to a little target. You choose an area of skin that has relatively good texture. So we're going to click right here because it's close to the area we're trying to fix up. So we're going to click once, and then we're going to go over sort of the inconsistencies, the blemishes, and we're just going to click. And we're not clicking and dragging. I don't like to click and drag too much. I like to just hit the actual pimple itself. So click, so blacken there, click, click. And right here, click, click, click. Sometimes you can do a little bit of a drag, but I don't want to do too much because then you can actually get into areas. You can see there's actually a little second cursor showing the source area I'm dragging from. And now I'm a little bit further down, so I'm going to set a new source. I'm going to go for about right here and just clean that up a little bit there. Good. And clean that up a little there, there. Moving on up, set my source with the Option click, and we're just trying to get rid of blemishes. But you don't want to over click, because then you can actually start getting sort of repeating patterns, almost like scarring, just because you're sourcing from the same area too much, which is why it's really important to always be getting new sources for your skin cleanup. Let's notice here I'm constantly changing the spot where I'm pulling from, just so that I'm not getting a repeating pattern. The human eye is really incredible at picking up those repeating patterns and then noticing that it looks kind of fake or weird. So always keep that in mind as you're doing cleanup here. So I'm going to just continue on. Clean this up. And there we go. You get the idea. Okay, so I've jumped ahead a little bit here just as I've finished up doing the last of the fixing here. You can see I've gotten most of the hairs and most of the skin issues taken care of. We've got some like minor blemishing now, but the skin tone in general is pretty decent. You know, still, if I really were to get picky, like if I were actually doing this for a professional job, I would spend a lot more time really making sure I'd gotten every sort of last little thing I could out. But I'm not going to go quite that far for this one. But I want you to kind of get to the point where you're at. Your image looks about like this. So there's still some sort of blemishing to the face, but we've cleaned up most of the worst of it. So now we're at the stage where we're no longer using the healing brush. Now we're going to get into the actual what's called frequency separation. So we're basically going to be separating the frequencies that are showing us texture from the frequencies that give us color. So light frequency is what frequency refers to, and different light colors and stuff operate on different wavelengths. I'm not going to get into the whole reasons why, but I'll show you how to do it. So what I want you to do is right click on your working layer, and we're going to duplicate it twice. The first one we're going to call color, because this will be our color frequency layer, and then we'll duplicate the color layer, and we're going to call it texture. This will be our texture frequency layer. So texture, color, and working all look exactly the same as of right now. So what I want you to do is click on your color layer over here, make sure it's actually selected, and then click on the little eye by the texture to turn it off. That will allow us to actually see what we're working on. If the texture layer is visible or has that eye there, we won't be able to see what's happening on the layers underneath. So it's very important that you always turn on and off layers if you're wanting to actually be seeing what's happening on the layer you've selected. So we're going to select our color layer, and we're just going to go to Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And basically wanting to go to the point where we got like just really beginning to smooth out that color as much as possible. You don't want to go so far like this because then you're not going to have much information to work with on your color layer. So you want to have your nice edge there. Like, okay, that's looking pretty good. This should be fine. Like kind of 12 to 15 is decent as far as color goes. I think I'm going to leave it at 12 pixels. I'm going to hit OK. So this is going to be my color layer. So when we're making a frequency separation, what we're actually doing is we're finding the difference between two layers. So we've got this blurred layer. Now we're going to click on the eyeball to turn the visibility of the texture layer on. We're going to click on the texture layer, and you got to make sure the texture layer is actually selected. And then we're going to go to Image and Apply Image. We're going to choose the layer to apply the effect to. So we're going to choose our color layer because that's the one we're referencing. Pardon me. We're going to set our blending mode to subtract and set our scale to 2 and our offset to 128. And there's a whole series of reasons why this works, but for what you need to do or need to know, just set these to your settings. So layer color, make sure your color layer is underneath your texture layer. Blending mode subtract, scale 2 and offset 128. Click OK. Then with the texture layer still selected, we're going to go to our blending mode drop down above there where it currently says normal, and we're going to go down and we are going to go to linear light. Click on that. And the first thing that you'll notice is that it now looks exactly the same as it did before we did all these things. And that's because when you blend these two layers using that blending mode, they're showing the original, even though it's made out of two, except one is now a texture layer and one is now a color layer. So I want you to click on the color layer, and we're going to zoom in on his cheek here, and we're going to see what the color layer can do for us. So we're going to go to, now where is it? Our mixer brush tool. We are going to, now I'm going to have to experiment here, make it a little bigger, and start blending. Load. Yeah, that's getting a little better for color. Blending, blending, blending. So I've got my, we don't want it to load the brush. We don't want to have any brush load, so no color. So we're basically saying we're only blending things that are existing right there. And we are cleaning the brush after each stroke. So we're basically just it's like taking a totally clean brush on a painting and just blending the colors together exactly where they are at. I've got a wetness of about 41, a load of about 47. We could probably actually take that down, a mix of about 29 and a flow of about 14. So we're just gonna kind of, in areas of discoloration, begin the process of just blending it out a little bit. You can actually see if we turn off texture here, how that's going. I find it a little easier to work like this. And that just evens out some of the color blemishes that we kind of had happening. Remember also, you always want to you got a little bit of like greenness under the eyes there, and if we kind of blend that in, it actually really cleans up how that looks a little bit. And eyebrows here, blend this in along the nose and right here. We're just kind of smoothing out the gradations on the skin a little bit. And this is kind of a thing where you got to finesse it over time. You got to get used to it. And now also if I go to texture and I do a healing brush, source, and we're only using the current layer. If I go here, I can still do my texture change, but it's not affecting the color underneath. So I'm now actually only dealing with texture, which is also really nice. So I don't have to worry about sort of inconsistencies in color. And just going through, cleaning up the few artifacts left over that I'd missed last time. Slowly working this till it's all nicely taken care of. And there we go. Here we go, yeah. Just getting rid of texture issues. This one right there, there, and right there. I could probably actually do a little bit more mixing here, just to get it all pretty consistent. That's looking not bad. So now if I want to just merge this together so you can kind of see what it looks like, if I take these two and I hit Command G to group them into a folder, I can turn it on and off. I'm going to turn off my working layer as well. And now I can see what the difference is between these two different groups. So here's the original and here is the final. So you can see how well frequency separation works for really cleaning things up. This one looks a little flat to me. The image itself is a little flat, but I would have liked to add, I'd probably go and do a little of dodging and burning or add some more depth back into it at this point if I was actually doing a full retouch. But this gives you a great idea of how well frequency separation works and how to go about doing it. So this is what you're going to be doing on your assignment, and good luck.